Stop complaining about your bad luck. Seriously, unless you've been hit by 2 nuclear bombs in 3 days or kicked a safe until the infection killed you, you are doing just fine. We have collected 33 people who were absolute magnets for cosmic misfortune. From the lottery winner who couldn't cash the ticket to the genius who invented the phone but couldn't afford the patent. This isn't just bad timing. It is the universe being a bully. You're about to feel a lot better about your life. 1. Kostas Mitsotakis. Picture this. You live in a tiny, struggling village called Sodeto in Spain. It's 2011, the economy is in the trash, and everyone is broke. The residents decide to pool their money for the massive Spanish Christmas lottery, known as El Gordo. Every single household in the village contributes to buy a share of the ticket. Except one guy, Kostas Mitsotakis. He was a filmmaker living in a barn just outside the village, and the ladies selling the tickets simply forgot to knock on his door. Well, guess what happened? The village won the jackpot. Over 700 million euros rained down on 70 households. Everyone became a millionaire overnight, except Kostas. Imagine the pain of watching your neighbors buy luxury cars and pay off mortgages while you are still heating up instant noodles, all because someone forgot to turn left at your driveway. 2. Tsutomu Yamaguchi. If Wrong Place, Wrong Time had a mascot, it would be Tsutomu Yamaguchi. This Japanese marine engineer was on a business trip in Hiroshima on August 6, 1945. Yes, that day, he miraculously survived the atomic blast, burned and terrified, but alive. Most people would take a sick day, but Tsutomu was built differently. He dragged himself to the train station and went home to recover in Nagasaki. He arrives, bandages and all, and goes to his office on August 9th to explain to his boss that, hey, the city I was just in got erased by a single bomb. His boss literally said he was crazy, and at that exact moment, flash. The second atomic bomb detonates over Nagasaki. He survived 2 nuclear blasts in 3 days. He lived to be 93, but talk about the worst work week in human history. 3. Ronald Wayne. We all know Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak, the wizards behind Apple. But there was a third founder, Ronald Wayne. He was the adult in the room, brought in to keep the 2 young Steves in check. But Ronald got nervous. He was terrified that if the company went bust, the creditors would come for his assets. So, 12 days after founding Apple, he legally removed his name from the contract and sold his 10% stake for $800. Let me do the math for you. Today, that 10% would be worth over $100 billion. He traded the GDP of a small country for the price of a used sofa. He claims he doesn't regret it, but come on, Ronald. You definitely check the stock price every morning and cry into your coffee. 4. Gary Hoy. Confidence is key, but physics is non-negotiable. Gary Hoy was a hotshot corporate lawyer in Toronto who loved a specific party trick. He wanted to prove to intern law students that the glass windows of the Toronto Dominion Center were totally unbreakable. So he did what any rational professional would do. He ran across the room and slammed his entire body weight against the window on the 24th floor. Here is the tragic irony. Gary was right. The glass did not break. However, the frame holding the glass? That gave up immediately. The entire pane popped out like a cork, taking Gary down 24 stories to the street below. He proved his point, but it was definitely his final closing argument. Talk about a technicality. 5. Anne Hodges. The odds of winning the lottery are low. The odds of being hit by a meteorite? Virtually impossible, unless you are Anne Hodges. In 1954, Anne was doing the most dangerous activity imaginable, taking a nap on her couch in Alabama. Suddenly, a grapefruit-sized rock from outer space smashed through her roof, bounced off her massive radio console, and slammed right into her hip. She survived with a massive bruise, becoming the only confirmed human in history to be hit by a meteorite. The best part? She didn't even get to keep the rock peacefully. Her landlord sued her, claiming the space rock belonged to the house, not her. She survived an intergalactic assassination attempt only to get bogged down in property law. That is peak bad luck. 6. Pete Best. Imagine grinding with a band in dive bars for years, sleeping in freezing vans, and building the sound that would change the world. That was Pete Best, the original drummer for the Beatles. In 1962, literally moments before the band exploded into global superstardom, manager Brian Epstein called Pete into his office and said, "The boys want you out and Ringo in." Boom, fired. Within months, Beatlemania swept the planet. Pete had to watch his former friends become the most famous humans on Earth while he was back home working a regular job. Every time he turned on the radio, walked past a newsstand, or breathed air, it was a reminder of what he lost. It wasn't just a missed opportunity, it was an inescapable global soundtrack of his own misfortune. 7. Jack Daniel. You have probably seen his name on a bottle of whiskey at every bar in the world. Jack Daniel, the Tennessee sour mash legend. You'd think a man with that much booze would die of liver failure or at a wild party, right? Nope. One morning in 1911, Jack arrived at work early and tried to open his office safe. He had a terrible memory and couldn't remember the combination. Frustrated and angry, he did the rational thing. He kicked the solid steel safe as hard as he could. He broke his toe. That broken toe got infected. The infection turned into blood poisoning. And eventually, Jack Daniel died. He literally kicked the bucket because he had a temper tantrum. The irony? If he had just poured some of his own whiskey on the toe, the alcohol might have killed the infection and saved his life. 8. Guillaume le Gentil. This might be the most frustrating story ever told. Guillaume le Gentil was a French astronomer who wanted to document the transit of Venus, a rare event where Venus passes in front of the Sun. He traveled all the way to India in 1761. But because of a war between France and Britain, his ship couldn't dock, and he missed the event while stuck at sea. Undeterred, he decided to wait for the next transit, which was in 8 years. He stayed in India, prepping his equipment, waiting for that one specific day. 8 years later, the morning was crystal clear. Perfect weather. But just as the event started, a single cloud rolled in and blocked the sun. He saw nothing. Broken, he finally went back to France. But because he'd been gone for 11 years with no letters, everyone thought he was dead. His wife had remarried, and his relatives had sold off all his property. The universe didn't just rain on his parade, it stole his life. 9. Jerome Irving. Rodale. You know those people who constantly brag about their kale smoothies and perfect cardio routine? Jerome Rodale was the godfather of that movement. A wealthy publisher and health food fanatic, he spent his life insisting that organic living was the key to immortality. In 1971, he appeared on the Dick Cavett Show to preach his gospel. He looked the host dead in the eye and confidently declared, "I'm in such good health that I fell down a long flight of stairs yesterday and I laughed all the way down. I'm going to live to be 100. Those were quite literally his famous last words. Moments later, while the camera panned to another guest, Rodale's head slumped onto his chest. The studio audience started giggling, assuming the eccentric old man was pretending to fall asleep as a joke. He wasn't joking. He had suffered a massive, fatal heart attack instantly. He died on national television in front of millions, less than 60 seconds after bragging that he couldn't be killed. 10. Wilmer McLean. If you think you have bad luck with real estate, spare a thought for Wilmer McLean. He was just a grocer living in Manassas, Virginia, when the American Civil War decided to kick off literally in his front yard. The First Battle of Bull Run raged across his property, and a cannonball even dropped down his kitchen chimney to ruin his stew. Wilmer decided he wanted absolutely zero part of this madness, so he packed up his family and moved 120 miles south to a quiet, obscure, middle-of-nowhere village called Appomattox to live in peace. 4 years later, the war was finally ending. General Lee sent a messenger to find a suitable house for the surrender ceremony. Out of all the houses in the South, the messenger knocked on Wilmer's door. The Civil War began in his kitchen and officially ended in his parlor. The poor guy tried to outrun history, but history just used Google Maps to find his new address. 11. Martin Todd. Losing your car keys is annoying. Losing a slip of paper worth £3 million is the kind of trauma that destroys your soul. Martin Todd and his wife were ecstatic when they realized they had the winning numbers for the UK lottery jackpot. They were already mentally spending the money, planning a life of luxury and freedom. But there was one tiny problem. They couldn't find the ticket. They tore their house apart, but it had vanished. Martin contacted the lottery organizers, and here is the most painful part. Their computer records proved he bought the winning ticket. They knew he was the winner, but because of a strict no physical ticket, no payout rule, they refused to give him a single penny. It wasn't a case of maybe he won. Everyone knew he won. He spent years in legal battles and became obsessed with the injustice, eventually losing his marriage and his sanity over a piece of paper that proved he was a millionaire on a technicality. 12. King Umberto. This story is so incredibly creepy that it sounds like a lazy scriptwriter just copy-pasted the characters. King Umberto Beaufort of Italy went to a small restaurant for dinner and noticed the owner looked exactly like him. I mean, identical twins level. Intrigued, the king invited him to the table. It turned out they were both born on March 14, 1844, in the exact same town. They both married women named Margarita. The owner opened his restaurant on the exact day Umberto was crowned king. It was a bizarre, cosmic connection. But the universe has a dark sense of humor. The very next day, the king was told the restaurant owner had been shot dead in a mysterious accident. The king was deeply saddened by the news. And mere moments later, an anarchist in the crowd stepped forward and shot the king dead too. They were cosmic twins, bound together by fate, born on the same day and deleted from existence at the same time. 13. Antonio Meucci. We all learned in school that Alexander Graham Bell invented the telephone. Well, your history book lied to you. Meet Antonio Meucci, an Italian immigrant who actually developed a voice communication device years before Bell. He called it the teletrafono and even demonstrated it in New York. He had the plans, the prototype, and the genius. What he didn't have was $10. That was the fee to renew his patent caveat in 1874. Meucci was destitute and simply couldn't afford the $10. 2 years later, Bell filed a patent for the telephone and became one of the wealthiest and most famous inventors in history. Meucci spent the rest of his life suing, trying to prove he was first, but he died poor and unrecognized. Basically, the smartphone in your pocket exists because of Meucci, but his entire legacy was erased because he couldn't pay a subscription fee that cost less than a pizza. 14. Roy Sullivan. Roy Sullivan was a park ranger in Virginia, and apparently, the god of thunder had a personal vendetta against him. The odds of being struck by lightning are incredibly low. Roy got hit 7 times. 7. He was hit in his truck, in his front yard, and while on patrol. His hair caught fire so often he started carrying a bucket of water with him just in case. He holds the Guinness World Record as the human lightning conductor. People were actually afraid to stand near him during storms, treating him like a walking bomb. But here is the saddest, most ironic twist. After surviving 100 million volts of electricity 7 times, nature couldn't kill him. Roy eventually took his own life at age 71 over an unrequited love. He could survive the wrath of the skies and the laws of physics, but he couldn't survive a broken heart. 15. Robert Todd. Lincoln. If you were a U.S. president in the late 19th century, the last person you wanted to see was Robert Todd Lincoln. He was the eldest son of Abraham Lincoln. We all know what happened to his dad in the theater. Robert rushed to his father's deathbed that night. Years later, Robert became Secretary of War. In 1881, he was standing at a train station with President James Garfield when Garfield was shot and killed. Fast forward to 1901. President William McKinley invites Robert to an expo in Buffalo. Guess what happened? An assassin shot McKinley. Robert was present for 3 presidential assassinations. He finally realized he was a walking curse for democracy and reportedly refused to attend any more state functions, telling people, "There is a certain fatality that waits for the presidential function when I am present." He was basically the angel of death for the White House. 16. Melanie Martinez. Most people move house to get a better school district or a bigger kitchen. Melanie Martinez from Louisiana moves because nature keeps smashing her life into pieces. This woman lost 5 different homes to 5 different hurricanes over a span of 50 years. Hurricane Betsy took the first one in 1965. Then came Juan in 1985, George in 1998, and the infamous Katrina in 2005. You would think at this point she would move to a desert or a bunker in Montana, but she stayed. In 2012, Hurricane Isaac decided to complete the set and destroyed her 5th house. She was even named the unluckiest woman in America by the media. At this point, I am pretty sure the weather map just looks for wherever Melanie is parking her car and steers the storm directly toward her. Her insurance agent probably drinks heavily every time he sees her number on the caller ID. 17. Daisuke Inoue. If you have ever butchered Bohemian Rhapsody in a sticky bar at 2 a.m., you have Daisuke Inoue to thank. He is the man who invented the karaoke machine in 1971. It was a revolutionary idea that changed global nightlife forever. But Daisuke was a musician, not a businessman. He wanted to teach the world to sing, so he didn't patent his invention. He thought it would be greedy. Big mistake. Massive corporations immediately copied his design and made billions upon billions of dollars. Daisuke made zero. He lost out on an estimated $150 million in royalties. While tech giants bought private islands with his idea, he got nothing but a pat on the back. Decades later, he was awarded the Ig Nobel Peace Prize as a consolation for inventing a new way for people to tolerate each other. That is basically the universe handing you a participation trophy after stealing your winning lottery ticket. 18. Henry Gunther. Timing is everything, and Henry Gunther had the worst timing in military history. Henry was an American soldier fighting in World War I. On November 11, 1918, everyone knew the war was ending. The armistice was signed and set to take effect at exactly 11 a.m. At 10:59 a.m., literally 60 seconds before peace, Henry decided to charge a German machine gun nest against orders. The confused Germans actually tried to wave him back, knowing the war was over in less than a minute. But Henry kept running and firing. He was shot and killed instantly. The guns fell silent 1 minute later. Henry Gunther became the last man to die in the Great War, dying for absolutely nothing, just so he could be a footnote in a history book. He missed surviving the entire war by the length of a TV commercial. 19. Alan Pinkerton. You would expect the founder of the Pinkerton National Detective Agency, the guy who saved Abraham Lincoln from an assassination plot and hunted down Jesse James, to go out in a blaze of glory. Maybe a shootout on a train or a knife fight in a dark alley. Nope. Alan Pinkerton, one of the toughest men in American history, was walking down a sidewalk in Chicago when he slipped. As he fell, he bit his tongue. It seemed like a minor, embarrassing injury, just like when you eat pizza too fast. But this was the 19th century. The tongue became infected with gangrene. The infection spread, and the legendary detective died. He wasn't taken out by outlaws or Confederate spies. He was killed by his own teeth in a slippery pavement. It is the ultimate anticlimax to a hard-boiled life. 20. Masabumi Hosono. Surviving the Titanic should make you the luckiest person alive, right? Not if you are Masabumi Hosono. He was the only Japanese passenger on the ship. When the Titanic was sinking, he found a spot in a lifeboat and survived. He returned to Japan expecting relief, but instead, he was met with pure hatred. The Japanese media and government branded him a coward and a disgrace to the nation. Why? Because the samurai spirit dictated that he should have gone down with the ship honorably rather than save himself. He lost his job, his reputation was destroyed, and school textbooks even used him as an example of how not to be a man. He lived the rest of his life in shame, wishing he had drowned in the freezing Atlantic rather than face the cold judgment of his own people. 21. Arnold Schoenberg. This is the ultimate self-fulfilling prophecy. Arnold Schoenberg was a famous composer who suffered from a severe case of triskaidekaphobia, a paralyzed fear of the number 13. He was obsessed with it. He dreaded his 76th birthday because 7 plus 6 equals 13. On Friday, the 13th of July, 1951, he decided to stay in bed all day to avoid any bad luck. He was terrified. His wife tried to comfort him, telling him the day was almost over. At 11:45 p.m., she looked at the clock and thought he had made it. But Arnold wasn't done with the drama. At 11:47 p.m., exactly 13 minutes before midnight, he muttered the word harmony and died. He spent his entire life running from a number, only for the universe to do the math and catch him in the final minutes of the day he feared most. 22. John Sutter. Imagine owning the exact piece of land where the California gold rush began. You would be the richest man on earth, right? Meet John Sutter. He owned the mill where the first gold nugget was found in 1848. He tried to keep it a secret, but word got out. Within months, a tsunami of 300,000 gold-crazy prospectors descended on his property. They didn't pay him rent. They destroyed him. The mob trampled his crops, slaughtered his cattle for food, tore down his buildings for firewood, and stole his equipment. Sutter was legally the owner of the most valuable land in America, but he couldn't stop the human wave. Instead of becoming a billionaire, he was driven into bankruptcy by the people getting rich off his soil. He spent the rest of his life petitioning the government for compensation and died with nothing. 23. King Alexander of Greece. We have seen kings die in battle, by poison or by the guillotine. But King Alexander of Greece died because of a domestic dispute between pets. In 1920, the king was walking his German shepherd in the royal gardens when a domestic macaque monkey attacked the dog. The king jumped in to break up the fight, and another monkey rushed in and bit him on the leg and torso. It wasn't a deep wound, but it became infected with sepsis. The king died weeks later. His death was catastrophic. It led to the return of his exiled father, a disastrous military campaign against Turkey, and the loss of a war that cost 250,000 lives. Winston Churchill later wrote, "It is perhaps no exaggeration to remark that 250,000 persons died of this monkey's bite." History hinges on the weirdest things. 24. Rosalind Franklin. If you ask someone who discovered the structure of DNA, they will say Watson and Crick. And that is because Watson and Crick committed one of the biggest intellectual thefts in history. Rosalind Franklin was the brilliant chemist who actually captured Photo 51, the X-ray image that proved the double helix structure. She did the work, but her colleagues showed the photo to Watson and Crick without her permission. They took one look at it, realized the answer, and published their famous paper. They won the Nobel Prize and became science legends. Rosalind was largely ignored. Tragically, she died of ovarian cancer at age 37, likely caused by her exposure to X-rays, before she could get any real credit. She literally gave her life for the discovery, and 2 dudes took the trophy and the history books. 25. Walter Kavanagh. If life was a video game, Walter Kavanagh was playing on impossible mode, with glitches enabled. By the time this guy turned 20, he had survived a list of disasters that would make a stuntman quit. He was struck by lightning, which is rare enough. But he was also bitten by a venomous snake, nearly drowned, and, get this, survived 2 separate plane crashes. Most people don't even get on 2 planes by age 20, let alone crash in them. He was walking proof that statistics are meaningless. People were terrified to stand next to him, thinking he was a magnet for catastrophe. While some called him the luckiest man alive for surviving, I'd argue he was the unluckiest man for getting into those situations in the first place. His guardian angel didn't just work overtime, he needed a union rep and a pay raise. 26. Edward A. Murphy, Jr. You know Murphy's Law, the idea that anything that can go wrong will go wrong. It's the motto of pessimists everywhere, but the story behind it is pure irony. Edward Murphy was actually an aerospace engineer working on rocket sleds for the Air Force. He was a perfectionist who hated incompetence. He originally coined the phrase to criticize an assistant who had wired a sensor backward, basically saying, if there is a wrong way to do it, he will find it. He intended the law to be a tool for safety and precision, to prevent mistakes. Instead, history twisted his words. His name became the global slogan for inevitable failure and bad luck. The man who dedicated his life to preventing errors is now forever remembered as the patron saint of screw-ups. That is Murphy's Law in action. 27. Ramon Artagavadia. Fear is there to keep us alive, and Ramon Artagavadia should have listened to his. In 1871, this Uruguayan businessman survived a horrific fire on a ship called the America and escaped by swimming for his life. He was so traumatized that he refused to travel by sea for 40 years. 40 years. Finally, in 1912, his family and friends convinced him that technology had changed. They told him about a new, luxurious ocean liner equipped with wireless telegraphs and watertight compartments. They said it was unsinkable. Trusting them, Ramon finally conquered his fear and boarded the ship. That ship was the Titanic. He spent 4 decades avoiding the ocean, only to step onto the one ship that would go down in history as the ultimate maritime disaster. The universe didn't just kill him. It played a 40-year-long con game on him first. 28. Roy Pearson. There is Petty, and then there is Roy Pearson. In 2005, Roy was a judge in Washington, D.C. who took a pair of pants to a local dry cleaner. The cleaners lost the pants. Annoying, yes. Worth a lawsuit? Maybe for the cost of the pants. But Roy decided to sue the mom-and-pop shop for $54 million. Yes, million. He argued that their satisfaction guaranteed sign was a legally binding contract that they violated, causing him mental anguish. He represented himself in court, turning the legal system into a circus. He literally cried on the witness stand over his lost trousers. The result? He lost the case, obviously. But he also lost his job as a judge because a panel decided he lacked judicial temperament and he became a national laughingstock. He traded his entire career and reputation for a missing pair